Okay, let us start. Yesterday we were working on portfolio. That's the next part we wanted to work with. Although I got some code that does what our portfolio is supposed to do, but it may give us problems with some of the content that we've got. So this is an example of what the portfolio does. So I already have the images in my images folder. However, I'll need to actually copy what is here and put it in our portfolio. Okay, so we might need to change a couple of things, but we'll change based on what this does. So I'll just show you what the original code that I've got has, and we'll modify it to suit what we are hoping to actually get. So for example, here's what we wanted to do. We want to be able to work with our portfolio, which is there, and we'll probably remove the first heading. That's the first thing we'll do. And we'll also change this layout. We can also put our CSS in that manner, but we don't want it to be like that in our code. We want to actually work with our style sheet. Okay, so maybe what we can do here is for this particular page, because we just want this page to have a slightly different twist to how each page works. So we'll put our style, and in our style we'll then put the following content. So for example, we want the box sizing and the body and the header. We want this to be in our main document, which is here. So just right click, we paste there so that we have the following titles in our, or rather on our page. So if I save that and we refresh, we'll actually see that nothing much shows based on what we would have put, but we are getting there. We want to see what each element gives us. Okay, so as it stands, there is no change. However, we then want to work with what we've got here. So this will actually put in our main document, and I'll explain as we proceed. Here I just pretty much copied and pasted, but maybe let me explain the code before we go any further. So we are saying we want to be able to put this for all the entire page. Okay, the entire page, we wanted to have a box sizing of a border box. What this simply means, we want to be able to control how our images and our text, among other things, are displayed on the page. Okay, so we'll see in a bit what this does. And then for the body, we decided to actually put a margin of 0 and font family. Although this is actually a repetition, we don't actually need this. This we don't need. We've got a header, which simply works with our header, okay, and gives the content that we want to work with. Okay, so what we can then do is the following. We can then put a div like that, and then this div should then have a class. We've actually not worked with classes, so a period and header means it's a class. So we need to put a class, and then we say is equal to, and then we call this header. So in other words, we are then actually working with this header, and then we say portfolio grid like that. Okay, if we save and then we come back to our document, we can then be able to actually see that this is our portfolio grid. Maybe let's make it a header as well, so that it shows what we initially had and not change the concept that we had initially. Okay, from there we then just put a head h1, and then we've got our portfolio grid showing, and if we refresh, there we go, we'll have a portfolio grid. Okay, this also can be useful in everything else that we'll be working with. However, let's work on it step by step. So if we put our style like this, it's as good as we've put a style sheet within our page, and then this page can also be able to work with our style sheets within the style tags. So this is another easier way of actually having our styles and tag them based on the actual page that we're working on. So this then means this style sheet and that style sheet pretty much work hand in hand, and we can be able to view and see what each element does. Okay. Outside of that, we can then do the div tags that we need. So the first div tag is to actually give us our row. So we've got a class is equal to row. We want it to be a row, and then within this row we then need a div tag for the columns. So we put a div, and then this becomes a class column, like that. So in other words, we have a div row, we have a div column, and we need 3 columns. So I need to copy this and paste it 3 times. And then now we've got our content. So we now need a row and a column in our classes. So in our styles, we then need to come back and put a row. So it's a period, then row. We open and close brackets. We also have a period and then column. We open and we close brackets as well. So this then means with these two, we actually now have a row and a column that helps us work with our content. Okay, so here's where now we need to reference this side. Okay, you then notice that with the 2 elements, we've got a column and we've got a row, and we've got a row plus the image. Okay, so this then means each of these elements we can actually play around with them as we are proceeding. Okay, so for example, for the column, we're then saying the column, we need to have a float left, we need to have a width of 50, we need to have a padding of 10. Okay, so we are actually going to work with this, but change it a bit. We don't want to then have duplicate code, so to speak. Okay, so for a column, we then have a float, which means everything goes to a certain direction. Okay, so let's just call it left. Okay, we also need a padding. We had 10 there, but I think I can work with about 7 px. Okay, and then we also had a width. Okay, let's put our width at 35%. Let's also play around with our height as well, and our height, we'll put it at 45%, something like that, so that we don't really have a big column, and we can work with that. Okay, at the same time, we also then noticed with our column, we also have an image. And with our image, we then need a margin. A margin of it was 15 pixels, like that. Okay. This way it will be done. I don't know if there's anything that I left out. We had a margin of top. Okay, maybe, but we had left it as margin. It will still almost give us the same end result. Let's just leave it at that so that we see what this does. Also, we've got our row. I think for the row we can actually copy everything as it is. We really don't want to change anything there, but maybe let's explain it as we proceed. Okay. Maybe let's actually remove this row, and then we are left with that one, so that we have it as it is. Okay, so pretty much what this means is we don't have any content. So our content pretty much gives us where each element is and how we want to display. We want to display it as a table, and we want to clear both sides. So that's the left and the right side of our page. Okay, if we refresh, there's not much that we can see because we don't have information as yet. Okay, so to see what any of this does, let's actually get to our portfolio, and then we put an image. Okay, so we've got img, which stands for our image. We then have our source, which is equal to something, and then we want style. Okay, and then with our style we want width equals 100%, like that. Let me just verify if I got it. Okay, yes, that's no, I actually need it as a period, oh sorry, a colon, not an equal to, something like that. And then we want our images, and then we want a cat.jpg, like that. I can click on save. And if we have this running well, if we refresh, we're supposed to have our image. Okay, so now we have our image, and we know that our code is pretty much working well. Okay, so let's put more images and see what each image does. Okay, so we were doing this just to have a glimpse of what the code does. So I think we'll need to put 4 images per each column. Okay, then we can simply change each image. Okay, here we can change this to beach. Here we can change this to cabin. Here we can change this to cake. Here we can change this to camera. Here we can change this to car. You can see I'm getting my names there, so I'm just copying what each element has, and we will see how each of these will be, or will give us a response. So this can be corridor, this can be design, this can be lady, this can be laptop desk, and this can be mountains, like that. Okay, so a brief explanation before we see what this does. We've got our header, which we have designed in our style sheet that we've got in this particular page. So we said the header represents a class, and the class, we've got it in our style setup, which is there. And our header simply has a text align center and a padding of 32. That's what we've got with our header, which will then help us work with the rest of the page. Okay, and whilst working with the rest of the page, we split our page into rows and columns, where our row pretty much is the entire set of images, and our column is the set of the individual images within that particular column. So in other words, if we've got the 3 columns, they'll actually be displayed as a column. However, in our CSS, this is what we've got for each of the 2. We are saying with our row, we've got our content, our display, and our clear. And then with our column, we've got a column with a float left, our padding with a 7, our width with 35%, our height with 45%. Okay, if that is in order, we can refresh and then see what each element does. Okay, so now we've got all our images showing up in that manner, although this is not the idea that we were going for. Okay, this is not the idea that we were going for. If you can see, all my images now are following one straight path, and in this particular case we had our grid showing up this way. So this then means with this setup, our box sizing is actually not working. That's number 1. And number 2, we have changed our code slightly. So one of the instances is our height. We need to remove our height. My mistake, I need to put that. So we save. Let's see, after playing around with our height. Okay, our height is not really our issue. Okay, so our issue with our images is we've got our styling right, whereby we've got the styles, okay, which is the row and the column and the image, and that seems to be working fine. However, we might need to troubleshoot and see how we can do this better. So if I right click and I go to inspect, I'll then notice that I can see my code, part of my code, what I've got in my Visual Studio and what I've got in my page. Okay, so let's say, for example, I edit this. Okay, let's say I put maybe 40%. I press enter. I'll then actually see that my image reduces in size. Let's say here I also do the same. Let's say I put 50% on this image. Okay, okay, changes. I put 40% on that image. 40%. It also changes that image. This one I put 50. And then my images start looking a little bit better. So 40 plus 50 gives us a slightly better look. I'm sure I need to do the same for all the others. So maybe I'll just be doing 40, 50, 40, 50 for the rest of the images and see how it will look. So it's another way of actually working with your images until you get the answer that you think is better, or until you get the look that you prefer. Okay, so after modifying some of the images, here's what it looks like. Here I think we'll just continue with the 40-50 range and see what the output would be. This we make it 40 again. This we make it 50. This we make it 40. Okay, so after having our 40 and 50, we've got something that looks like that. And then to make it easier, I think I can just copy. I don't think I can copy. Can't copy. I have to do all of this in or maybe I can actually do it this way. There's another way we can do it and make it easier. Okay, I can come to my portfolio and then I put the following. I can actually make it a style. Okay, so we can say I am. Okay, we can make this st1 for style 1, and then I can also put it as st2 for style number 2, where each of the styles are then put a different width. So this will have a width of 50%. The next one will have a width of 40%. Okay, so that it becomes faster for me to actually work with. And then if I've got st1 and st2, I won't need style. Okay, I'll now need a class equals st1, and this also changes to class equals st2, like that. So I can then put st1 and st2 in any of the options that I want, so that we see the changes that we had previously. So this becomes st1. Okay, this I want this to be st2. This I also want this to be st2. This should be st2. This also becomes st2. So I can just save. I know there's some that still have 100%, but let's refresh our page to see what it will look like. Okay, I've changed some of the values. For example, if I now scroll, I'll see a similar setup to what we had in what we were viewing just now. So let me just finish up by doing the remainder of the images. This becomes st1, so I changed that to st1. I also changed this to st1. Like that. So if I refresh, I'll then see my images in a slightly better mode, or in a slightly better setup. And that's the setup we're hoping to get, and we have actually put it in the order that we would want. Although, as you can see, there's this big space over here. We can maybe play around with it and give it a bit of some space. And yeah, this is now our CSS. We'll be having an idea of how our portfolio works, and maybe in the next lesson we can play around with how it all eventually looks. So we can end our lesson here.